Hi, this is Trevor from GHD-repair.co.uk. I originally noticed a new model of GHDs. This is the GHD Contour. It has a wavy plate for sort of crimping and creating waves, but it looked very familiar as the GHD SS5 model looks exactly the same. The SS5 just has the flat gold plates, but everything else looks exactly the same as these. So I thought we would purchase a pair of these, have a closer look and make sure that they are exactly the same as the SS5 and the operating temperature is the same, which would mean that we can repair these. So that's what we've done. Same protective cover as the SS5s. So as usual, we've got the various leaflets and instruction manual. All of that's going straight in the bin. There is another card here. Well, that's just stuck in the top and it's got nothing on it apart from GHD. I'm not sure why they'd bother wasting money doing that, but there you go. So if we have a quick look, as I say, these do appear to be exactly the same as the SS5 model, just with different plates, and as you can probably see, they just match together there and crimp or wave the hair. So I thought we'd take these apart and have a closer look. So to take these apart, you first need to carefully pop off the hinge covers. Just wiggle a flat blade side to side. It helps if the plastic is warm. So in the middle of winter, it would be a good idea just to gently warm these on the top of a radiator or just with a hot air dryer, so you don't break the plastic pieces that are on here. They're quite fragile, especially when they're cold. So that's that. You'll then find two Phillips head screws, one to hold and the other side to twist, and this will come apart quite easily. Remove the screw and the washer, and then with a small round screwdriver you can just push it through and push that hinge pin out like that. You can then separate the arms. Now if you were just say replacing the mains cable, at this point you've got this oval shaped end ring to take off. There's two screws in here, but if you take these two screws off and try and pry this up, this will often hold it in place, and if you force it you will crack this end ring. I'll loosen the screws so I'll show you what I mean, but there is a simple trick to remove this end ring safely without any damage whatsoever. So I've loosened the screws and trying to pop that up, but this is holding it in place. So if you just get a blade and just tuck it into the corner there and just gently pop that off like that, that will come off. The cover will then come off, and if you lift up the cable and the socket, just gently pull, the type 3 cable will come out. You can then remove the gold end ring. There's absolutely no damage to that, and then you can replace the cable, and it's literally just a reversal. New cable, end ring on, just a little bit of grease on the end, push that in and reassemble the top. But we're stripping these, so we won't be fitting any of this. Type 3 cable will often have a moulded on plug. The replacement cables do not have a UK plug on the end, they have the 2-pin Euro style adapter, and that is so you can use them overseas, but you would need a UK adapter like this one where the 2 pins go into there, and you shut that up, tighten the screw and use them in the UK, and for overseas reverse it undo the screw, open it up, pull the 2-pin connector out, and you're good to go in Europe. So the next thing we're going to do is just pop out this nylon bush from there and remove the hinge spring. Notice the orientation of that hinge spring. The longer piece goes down and towards the on-off switch. So you would put it in, line it up, push the nylon bush back through, and you're done. So there are 3 screws on the arm cover. On older irons, these screws are easy to undo, but you will often break, and you'll often find them already broken before you try and undo them. They will often break the plastic. There's 2 plastic pillars here, and because of the heat they become very brittle, and you'll often find them broken off. Screws still in the arm and the little pillars will be attached. The only way to fix that really is with high temperature silicone. Epoxy is not so good, it doesn't really like the heat and it will tend to separate from the plastic. But just roughen up the plastic, use some high temperature silicone, and reassemble them. What I do then is wrap an elastic band around this part after covering this with some paper. Elastic bands will mark plastic, so don't put elastic bands around bare arms. So a little bit of paper around, elastic band around. 24 hours later you can remove all of that, and you're just doing that to hold the arm cover down and tight against this part here. If you don't do that and it's a little bit proud, these edges here, the corners, can catch on the hair because they're raised up very slightly. So on a normal repair we would now be checking the thermal fuse, which is the 2 outer brown wires. We would check that. It should read as almost a complete dead short circuit, so in my case it's reading 0.2 of an ohm, but that's probably mostly cable of the probes. So I get 0.2 when I touch the probes and 0.2 when I touch the thermal fuse. So the thermal fuse is good. The way the elements are connected means you will get half the reading that you would expect. So the elements are 70 ohms or thereabouts. So the reading you're going to get, if you check here, the 2 inner connections is 35 ohms. If you get a reading of 70 ohms, one of these 2 elements has failed. And if the thermal fuse is good and you get a reading of 70 ohms, you can almost guarantee that the element that's failed is this side, because if it has failed on the other side, that is where the temperature is sensed from, and this side will continue heating up and up and up, and eventually the thermal fuse will fail. So if it's failed this side, you will find the thermal fuse is open circuit and you get a reading of 70 ohms, and that means that side's failed, not this side. So as I say, I am just stripping these for spares and just for a look at video for customers who may want to order parts for this particular model. It is exactly the same as the GHD SC5, but customers may not realise that and only search for the SC5, which this model is. So we're doing a separate repair video for it. So 4 small screws to take out, and then this whole assembly will lift out. There are 2 silicone pads, and these just allow for slight movement sideways, backwards and forwards, and very slight movement up and down, just to allow these to touch perfectly. Just pop these off and store those. Now, to change the thermal fuse on this is pretty straightforward. You would need to just straighten the wires out, and if you just slide this back, see the way that plastic has slid away from the metal of the ceramic plate. You just need it back a little bit, and then you can go in there with some pointy pliers, grab one of the thermal fuse wires, lift the thermal fuse up a fraction, and then just pull it out to the side so it's moved like that. Then slide the plastic mount again and pull, slide and pull. eventually you'll hear a little ping and the thermal fuse will be clear of the metal clip, and at that point you can just bend it up like that and pull out like that. Now that thermal fuse is perfectly good. This is a brand new pair of irons. To replace the thermal fuse, you will simply...
I don't know that one.
Good old Alexa. You just grab a new thermal fuse, you push each eyelet through the little silicon figure of 8 that you can see in there, and push it through, lift it up like that, tuck it under the mount, push down and reassemble by just gently slide, push, slide, and then it will click back in place like that, and you are done. Now if the element is broken, remove the thermal fuse as normal, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You can sometimes slide the mount over the metal spring and it will come off clear, or you can do what I'm doing here, just gently push against it and the whole assembly is coming apart. The other thing you can do if the element is broken, just grab the wires and slide the ceramic plate clear like that, and then you can continue sliding the metal apart. You might need to use a flat screwdriver just in there against the metal clip, but eventually you'll be able to work out how to just slide it out like that until it comes clear. Then you've got your mount, the spring clip and the ceramic plate. I'm just going to wipe off the glue from that. We're going to be taking photos of this. This is the biggest problem with GHD repairs, this thermal paste. It's not particularly toxic to humans. It is extremely toxic to fish, aquatic life, so you do not want to be getting this anywhere like that. So that is the new plate, exactly the same both sides, but just one has been spun around the other way so they actually interlock when you close the irons. Now if you were repairing this now, the refitting process is slightly different and easier than taking them apart. So it doesn't matter which way around this goes. If you've got scratches on your plate, you may prefer to make sure they're in exactly the same position. If you're scratched here, make sure they're back at the top. If you want to hide them, you can just spin it around and have it down the other end, but make sure the other plate interlocks correctly. So in this particular model you would have to change both direction of both ceramic plates together if you were trying to hide a scratch or anything like that. So literally with new thermal paste gently smeared evenly over here, you would put the element back in place. You would then get the spring mount and push it back in place. Just tuck it in one side first, and then with a flat blade just push down the other side, and then you would get your thermal fuse, feed the wires through the silicon piece like that, push it all the way through, and then tuck it under this spring clip. I'm not doing that in this case. We want these for spare parts and photographs, so that is going away. So that is how you would deal with that side. Now on older irons, I mean this is a brand new model, so I'm not expecting to see these in for repair anytime soon, unless somebody has damaged their mains cable or something like that. The mains cable is a Type 3 mains cable, which we keep in stock, but on older ones you will find sometimes that these little plastic lugs here that clip onto the ceramic plate are broken, and what will happen then is one end will be hanging loose. So kind of like, I can't do it, it's too new, it won't do it. Now there's a couple of ways you can repair that. You can either buy a replacement mount from us, they're always in stock, or if you have high temperature silicon, you can assemble the element with the spring clip and thermal fuse, put this on one side and press and click over. That's how we're going to reassemble this. It's much easier. And then pop an elastic band around here, and then with the high temperature silicone in each of these 4 holes, just squeeze a small amount of silicone into each side, each hole, and then leave for 24 hours. You must make sure that the mount lines up correctly with the plastic. You don't want it looking like this. It must be lovely and square, because after the sealant's gone off, it's going to be a real nightmare to get that apart again without any damage. So either replace it with a new part, or use silicone high temperature sealant to repair it. So that pretty much covers that side. Do not forget to replace the little silicone pieces. They go in here, and they are there for a reason. Do not forget to replace them, or the little pieces there for the mount. Another thing that can cause problems on these irons is the main switch, and we'll just put these screws back in and cover that. Again, there will be no issues on this pair because it's brand new. When you turn these on and you turn them off, there's a tiny little spark inside the main switch, and over time that can develop a little bit of soot, a bit of carbonisation, and that can cause a bit of a bigger spark at switch on. And the PIC processor, the little chip that controls everything that's mounted in this arm, really is not happy with sparking noises, sparks going on, and it can corrupt it and cause other problems like overheating or just complete failure of the chip. In case you ever need to replace the socket, cable socket, there are 2 screws here, and you just lift out the socket and replace it. I notice on this one that they have lined the cables up both down the sides of this yellow capacitor. On all of the older models, you'll find that the brown wire, or the longer wire, is tucked underneath that capacitor, and then the blue one goes to the side of it like that. I don't know whether you can see that or not. So brown one underneath the yellow capacitor, blue one to the side of it. And although this wasn't assembled like that, I would still assemble it the old way, because I think that gives a little bit more clearance. Sometimes the 2 wires, if they're side by side, they can get trapped when you put the cover back on. So back to this switch. With a very small jeweler's flat-bladed screwdriver, you can just wiggle it into the side and then wiggle it into the other side, and that whole top bit will come off. If you grab the center switch piece and lift that off, you'll see in this case there's a little piece of white plastic which has come adrift. There's 2 tiny little springs with 2 tiny white plastic pieces, and they are very easy to lose, but there is grease on them, and it's unusual for them to come adrift like that. So just pop that down the way you took it off. You'll find 2 metal fingers in there. There's 2 fixed contacts inside, hopefully you can just see that in there. There's obviously 2 movable contacts. So you would just scrape them clean if they're sooty, same with this, and just pop them back in exactly the same way. Make sure they are on the little central pivot point, like so. They only go one way round, so just make sure you put them back the same way. It's very clear which end it has the contact point on. Now if we just pinch this slightly, pick it up and pop it back over, that will only go on properly one way round. So if you are struggling to get that back on, you may have dropped it and spun it round by 180 degrees. It should go on easily, and you'll hear positive clicks like that. Very little else goes wrong with this side. I'm going to put the screws back in because we are, as I say, scrapping this pair and taking photos of it for the website. And if you do ever have to buy a complete circuit board from us. You will find it comes complete with all of the screws in it, as you will see here. All you will need to do is undo the 4 screws, take the circuit, 6 screws because you've got 4 there, 2 there, undo those, leave the socket and the ceramic plate in situ, and just lift out this circuit board. Keep these 2 coarser thread screws to reassemble the new circuit board. Obviously I don't need to do that, and we will be putting this arm safely, well, both arms safely away and selling them as spares. Obviously these are brand new now. It is very, very rare to get brand new arms. You certainly can't buy them as spares, but this particular pair I found very reasonable price on eBay. Couldn't let that go just for the potential of checking that this is a repairable model, and also for the spares. Now, again, this side, 3 screws, same issues apply. 2 here can be very brittle with older irons. Be very gentle when you're unscrewing them, and if they break off the plastic lugs, you will need to glue them back in place with high temperature silicone. Now, slightly different layout on this circuit board. Obviously we have the little controller here, PIC processor. We have a little buzzer here. Really the only faults we get that are repairable would be failure of the 2 resistors here. You'll find one of them will usually go higher in value. They're about 50 ohms. You'll find if one's gone high, the irons might sit there bleeping, or they might be completely dead. Very often there will be a burn mark on the body of the resistor. We change both. We sell them as pairs, and even if only one has failed, you must change both at the same time. I don't know why, but many repairers only change one and then wonder why the irons are faulty again in 3 months' time. Well, and the customers had enough of them by that stage, and they've sent them into another repairer, often us, and we find that one's been changed and the old one's failed. So change both. We sell them as a pair, fit them as a pair. The PIC processor does fail. As I said earlier, it doesn't like sparks, and that can be from when you plug the irons in at the mains, or you unplug them when they are turned on at the switch. So I would always recommend that the irons are turned off at the switch before you plug them into the wall socket or unplug them from the wall socket. Sparking in the cable and the cable socket, again, they do not like that, so that can be another cause for problems. So this PIC processor, there are 2 versions. There is the version for this square buzzer, and there's another version when this square buzzer is not fitted. There's a different buzzer system we don't need to talk about. But if you've got that square buzzer, that PIC processor is PIC processor Mark V square buzzer version. If you do not have that square buzzer there, it is PIC processor for GHD Mark Vs. Okay. It's relatively simple to remove this chip if you have soldering equipment, some liquid flux and some solder. The removal process is simply flooding the 8 pins with solder, and then you would touch a soldering iron on each side, side by side, until the solder on both sides is molten, and then you can literally flip off the IC with the hot soldering iron. You would then clean up the soldered pads with some copper braid. You then apply your liquid flux to the 8 pads and carefully position the new IC into place, and as you hold it in place with a fine tip solder iron with some solder in there, you can just drag solder each side, and then a little bit more flux and touch up any pins that perhaps didn't take properly. Any other fault, here in the workshop we don't bother going to component level. We've got used boards that we can change over much quicker, and it's not worthwhile changing many other of the components. We will check a couple if we have another board fault. There's a diode here, diode 9, that can fail, but anything else we tend just to fit a new pair of circuit boards. Now, temperature is controlled by this NTC. It's a negative temperature coefficient thermistor, and obviously the elements that side. So when these are turned on, the resistance varies with temperature, and that is how these decide what temperature they are at. A faulty thermistor can produce a continuous bleeping noise. The irons may be dead, the irons may have overheated and blown the thermal fuse on the other side, all because of problems with this thermistor. The very thin wires here can be removed simply by applying the soldering iron to the gold coloured part of the pad. A little bit of fresh solder, heat up the pad and gently pull the wire out. Repeat for the other side, and again replacing the thermistor, you can just prop some fresh solder on this side of these pads, and as you're holding the thin wire up against the solder, just apply the soldering iron, and as it melts the solder you can gently push the wire straight through the circuit board. Alternatively, you can undo these screws and do it outside, or solder these on underneath. I would never do that. Sometimes the thermistors we have thicker wires and they will not go through the circuit board. In that case, fresh solder onto the pads and lay the thicker wires across the top and simply solder them onto the top of the pad on both sides. Very simple to do, no real issues. Just got to be careful that you don't apply too much solder, because it will have a tendency to, where did that screw ping off to? I have no idea where that went. The solder will have a tendency to flow and then go through the holes and bubble up on the other side. And if it bubbles up too much on both sides, it can actually bridge and short out the contact. So I'm just going to show you how to get these off now. Just applying a little bit of solder, and then with the tweezers just going to grab one at a time, heat it, lift the wire out. You can do both together, but I'm just doing it more carefully for this video. There, and that's it. You are then able to remove this plate. Now this is even easier than the other sides to remove, because there is no raised thermal fuse clip, and you can literally slide off the mount like that. It will just catch on here, but it's very gentle, so just give it a slide off and it will go. The same story as before. This is exactly the same sort of mount. You've still got the same silicone pieces in here. If you have a broken lug, or if 2 or 3 are all broken, you can apply silicone sealant into these holes, put it all back together, hold it together in an elastic band and leave it for 24 hours. Now, to remove the element with thermistor, this one you can't really slide apart, because that thermistor is bonded to the element with a special sort of ceramic paste that is rock hard. So the easiest thing to do is with the thin nose pliers, just tuck it in the side here, like so. Just bend in the spring clip and bend it and click. You might find you damage that very slightly. If you do, just carefully bend it back into shape, and you can obviously reuse that without any problems. On older irons, this thermistor may just be a sort of melted splodge where it's failed. Very often it is not actually bonded properly to the ceramic plate anymore, and you'll find it's just loose. In this case, this is obviously absolutely rock solid, because it's a brand new pair of irons. You can replace, on older irons, you can replace the thermistor, and we do a dressed and ready to go. Actually, we don't at the moment. I'm still trialing these. What we do is sell a dressed thermistor. This one isn't dressed yet. It will basically have soldered ends, ready to solder back to the PCB. It will have heat shrink tubing over this part, and all you will do there is lay this on, apply some heat-proof silicone onto there and let it set for 24 hours, or you just buy the element with the thermistor already attached. So there are options, but in this case we will be using this element again, so I'm obviously going to leave it all intact. It is brand new after all. Don't need to damage it for the sake of the video. And then again, you can just check the plates. Now they obviously only go one way round, and it's that way. So if you do take these apart, this particular model, make sure you put them around the right way, because clearly they won't go together that way. They will go together that way. Okay, and that's pretty much that. You could also buy the SS5 plates, the gold flat plates, and you could fit those to this model. So if you no longer wanted your hair to be crimped or curled and you'd rather it was straight, we could sell you the correct flat plates to go onto here, and you would literally have to go through the same process that I've just gone through here, showing you how to take those apart. Now that screw came off and I have absolutely no idea where it went, so we are just going to grab another screw. Again, if you do lose parts, we do have them all available on our shop. If you lose the screws, if you need the resistors, PIC processor, a complete circuit board, it's all available. Or of course you may prefer to use our fixed fee repair service, which at the moment, August 2018, is $25.94. Don't envisage that price changing anytime soon. So in my case, these screws are going away in my pot. We'll reassemble the arm, and this will all be photographed and put up as spares on our shop. But I just thought this would be very interesting for customers to see that the SC5 model is exactly the same as the SS5. You can see here, SC5, and exactly the same parts. It's only the ceramic plates that have been changed. So we can repair these when they are out of warranty. The warranty is 2 years. Make sure you make full use of that 2-year warranty with GHD. Of course, we're happy to repair them at any time you like, but you do have a full 2-year warranty with GHD themselves. We are nothing to do with GHD. We are simply a company who repair GHD hair straighteners, and we've got nothing to do with GHD, the company themselves. If you damage the mains cable during the warranty period, you'll find that that is probably not covered. If you find yourself in that situation, we can sell the mains cable to you, or we can repair them for you and fit a new mains cable. So that's it. It's Trevor at GHD-repair.co.uk. Hope you found that useful, and we'll see you again soon.